Today we're going to make a painting inspired by the style of Ton Schulten, the Dutch contemporary painter best known for his landscapes in a bright, bold color block sort of a style. I'm going to start off by making just an abstract color field painting. Now, Ton Schulten's work is very, very neat and precise and geometric. Um, I appreciate his style, but I also feel like we don't always have to copy that style. My personal inclination is to love the sloppier, brushier work of artists like Helen Frankenthaler or Hans Hofmann's style. So I'm leaving my brush a little bit extra wet um, because I appreciate that sort of drippy aesthetic. Also, just for the purposes of the video, it makes for a quicker demonstration to cover the paper faster. But if you want your work to be a little bit neater, you might keep your brush a little bit drier as you're painting. The colors will spread less. You can also have a paper towel handy to soak up any excess water that might spill or drip or pool or spread out in ways that you don't want it to. So the first step is painting the whole paper. Now, as I said, if you want to use a paper towel, you can soak up some of that excess water. You can also use that to wipe off some of the paint and fade the colors, making it a little bit lighter in some areas. But my personal favorite way to use the paper towel is actually to crumple it, leaving that crumpled texture. And I blot my paper so that the crumpled texture of that paper towel shows through as a texture on my paper, on my painting. I'm basically using the paper towel like a stamp to create a texture that I find a little bit unique, a little bit different from the average watercolor painting. But again, to each his or her own. So now I'm going to let that dry. And for this next part, I'm using a Sharpie. You should start with a pencil, but we're going to sketch a landscape right over the top of our colored ground. The idea here is we're working on top of a colored ground or a colored background and drawing all the details that we would want to see to make this a more somewhat representational image. Now I'm going to start with basic details like a horizon line. I might make a pathway that goes off in the distance. Um, but again, even though I'm using a Sharpie, that's purely because it shows up better on video. You would want to start off with pencil so that you can erase and make adjustments if you make a mistake. So think about when you're designing a landscape, you always want to have some things that are near and some things that are far, some things that are bigger, some things that are smaller. And in this abstracted style, I'm going to keep things somewhat simplified. So I'm going to draw a sailboat more like just as a trapezoid with triangles for sails. I might draw buildings as just simplified shapes like rectangles, put a triangle on top. Um, I might do things having buildings slightly slanted, just because a sloped line is going to add a little bit more action to the composition. Angled lines are going to make it a little bit more active and dynamic. So I might abstract it in that way as well. Now, as I draw, I always want to think about balance on the composition. So I've got a one quadrant has that cityscape, the lower left quadrant has the sort of boat. Adding the sun up at the top adds a little bit more to give a little visual interest in that top right quadrant. And I think that's probably enough going on in this composition. So now I'm going to move on to painting. And painting over these lines with a little bit of black is going to do two things. It's going to make the lines a little bit heavier, give them a little bit more weight so they stand out, but it's also going to make it a little bit more unified than if I had just left this as a marker drawing on top of a painting. The paint is obviously going to be a little bit more unified with the paint underneath. Now, I might take different approaches to my buildings. I might want to add details like windows and doors, or in some cases, I like to just add some lines to indicate a little bit of value and a little bit of texture, almost like hatching or cross hatching lines. It sort of darkens things a little bit. It makes the forms seem a little bit more solid and a little bit more weighty, um, but it's also still abstracted. Now I accidentally dripped a little bit of paint on the tree, so I'm just going to make that a happy accident and give the tree a little bit of personality. And that's about it.